The rain lashed against the windows of the grand old mansion of the Mallocks in the north of Edinburgh, a relentless rhythm matching the ticking of the clock for Vernon. Now 85, bedridden and helpless, he could only reflect on the catastrophic mistake of his youth.
"54 years ago a curse was bestowed upon his whole family. One by one, his parents, kinsfolk, and confidants died from multifarious reasons. Veronica, his wife and last family, passed in the most brutal way an individual could feel. A mother to never have carried thy child, and be robbed by the last grain of sand left in her hourglass. Vernon thought it was the final twist of the curse's knife, but little did he know it was the only beginning of it. Upon mourning on the deathbed of his late wife, the witch, who was once good, left an exasperating drop that left him and his newborn son a vast of darkness. Your line suffer from your field. The boy will never see his 22nd winter, not unless he finds the lily that will bloom in his frozen time. Felix grew up hidden from the living world. His freedom was seized upon the four walls surrounding their state. He has everything he needs laid upon his feet. Servants, which his father changes every year on his birthday to prevent others from the knowledge of their family's secret. He was homeschooled by professional tutors around the world, mentored the famous coaches, yet only wished but has never once experienced an average being's routine, or generally to be a normal person. His father, Vernon, never introduced him to his acquaintances. He has tried everything, he really did. Get really well into sports, get excellent quizzes from his professors, and even tried once to help in their family business. But Vernon only shut him out, no matter how hard he tried. Eventually, he got tired of seeking for his father's validation. The year of his 9th birthday, he got the most wonderful gift, Mr. McKinley, their new family butler. He was the man besides his father that Felix looked up to. He taught him things beyond professors, coaches, or even mentors can teach. He taught him the reality of the world. He tells him stories of how it works, how soothing it is to travel and to find love in the eyes of a person who was once a stranger. In him, he found hope. He found a sudden interest. He dragged the curious cat in him out of its box. Mr. McKinney, although supposed to live on Felix's 10th birthday, has stayed due to his constant persistence to his father to let him stay and promised that would never ask him for anything again. It was a week before his 21st and last birthday when his father told him about the sole reason of their gap, the curse. Flashback. He confessed that on his Scalo Youth, just a few days before his wedding, he had a bachelor's party. They were drunk and drugged. He decided to go for a walk. But little did he know that it would be the most regretful decision he has ever made. He raped a helpless 14-year-old that night. When he came into his senses, he was half naked and is beside an unconscious girl. He got scared and ran away, but before he can, the girl's father, the witch, saw him. After hearing that from his father, he didn't know what to feel. At first, he was happy because his father finally gave in and talked to him. But on that same day, after flagration about the said curse, Vernon told him that he was figuring out the witch's last words before disappearing. And when he found out, he arranged Felix to marry one of his college's daughter at his 21st birthday. He didn't know what to say or how to feel, but to satisfy his father, he did what he was told to. But after only a year of their marriage, his wife left him upon knowing the curse. It went on for almost 3 decades. He married 20 times already and was divorced every single one of them for the same reason, the curse. They are either fearing that they would inherit the same curse or thinking that he was a nutcase. At times, he bumps into one of them during his father's assemblies, and unlike him, some of them has the trace of aging. He thought it would go on like that for life, but on the summer of his supposed 51st year of existence, for the first time, someone coughed his eye. A maid's daughter named Zaria was 18 when they first met. They got along quickly. She was the first friend he had after Mr. McKinley. He spent his days with her roaming around their estate and nights sneaking to the rooftop to admire the stars. He felt a pang of guilt for hiding his true identity from her. It went on for weeks, and it was the first day of spring when he finally confessed what he felt. Zaria hesitantly disagreed, but Felix was persistent. He talked to her mother behind her back and even offered a large amount of money for her to agree. After Zaria agreed to marry him, he was over the moon. On the night of their wedding, he knew he had to come clean and finally told Zaria about his deepest, darkest secret. He thought that the curse would finally break because she didn't have the same reaction that his previous wives had. And for the first time, he thought he was finally loved and that he was finally free from the curse. But he was wrong. After that day, Zaria would either avoid him by living with her friends or locking herself up in her chamber. He tried different ways to get close to her again, but none of it ever worked. It was the night of their third wedding anniversary when Zaria finally spoke to him in a candlelight dinner. He has tons of questions and she was overwhelmed by it. That's when the words slipped out of her mouth. "I only married you for your money." Felix was shattered into pieces. He didn't know what to say. She then excused herself and left the state to give him space. He was devastated. He started wasting away, and Mr. McKinley, already on the cusp of her silvery years, was severely worried for him. He tried to cheer him up, but none of it ever worked. After a few months of sorrow, he decided to take a break from the pain and distract himself. He started reading his old books. He then reunited with his passion, learning and teaching history. He remembered the days where he would blab to Mr. McKinley and their other servants about ancient civilizations and events. He was also a big fan of literature, of stories that lived through his imagination. While he was reminiscing about his younger days, an idea struck him. He immediately called Mr. McKinley to arrange his plans, but the man hesitated to follow it. He told him that his father would never agree. He argued that his father wouldn't even notice that he is gone. It went on for a few days, yet upon his persistence, the butler finally agreed. His plan was to teach at the University of Edinburgh, where he could distract himself on tour. When he arrived, he thought that he could find peace there. After all, going there was his unfulfilled dream. But upon entering the entrance hall, he saw the last person he wanted to see, Zaria. Their eyes met, but she quickly looked away. She was with her friends, walking towards his direction, but she only walked past him, as if she never knew him. He didn't know that she went back to college after leaving him. He thought that it must be destiny telling him to get her back. After all, they weren't divorced yet. A ray of hope glimpsed upon him. He would get her back. It was the first week of autumn and classes will start the day after tomorrow. He was a bit worried because he still doesn't have his syllabus for his classes, and so he found himself at the dean's office to ask for it. She then explained that it was supposed to be sent in his email account, which he didn't provide. He was intrigued by what she said. He doesn't know what an email is, so he just nodded and asked her, "Can I just have the typewritten syllables then?" The dean chuckled upon his request, yet instantly stopped once she realized he was serious. She said, "Do you mean a hard copy of it? Sure, I'll print it for you." She then grabbed her laptop, opened the file of his syllabus, and printed it out for him. He was mesmerized of how fast she did it. He couldn't stop himself to ask about it. But just as he's about to speak, her cell phone rang and she picked it up. He got more curious, but then decided to leave her office. When he walked out the door, he scanned the paper he was holding, and as expected, he was assigned as a professor at the Master of Arts in English Literature and History program, which made him a bit pleased. He was still familiarizing himself with it when a girl running across the hallway bumped into him and spilled her matcha all over his clothes and his printed syllabus. She just shouted sorry and continued running. He was miffed by how she just sprinted off after causing him trouble. Good thing that he memorized his entire schedule before it got ruined. He was mostly agitated because the cashmere sweater which Jaria gave him got ruined. On the first day of classes, he was welcomed by the prefecture of damp concrete and freshly turned soil. He covered his head with his briefcase and ran through the wet pavement. When he arrived at the lobby, he grabbed his pocket watch inside the breast pocket of his pink checkered three-piece suit. He was already 2 minutes late for his first class, so he hurried. And when he walked inside the lecture room, everyone looked at him as he was some sort of an oddball. Some of them chuckled while some murmured to each other. One of the students stood up and told them to settle down. He then walked up to Felix, introduced himself as Lucian, and pointed that at a seat is vacant beside him. When he looked at his finger's direction, he saw a familiar figure facing the other way. Lucian noticed and called her Astria, and then she turned around and smiled at them. His annoyance from their last encounter immediately came back to him. He turned towards the platform and rested his suitcase on the table. He introduced himself as their professor in English Literature 101 for the semester. Majority of them laughed, others were confused, and some went silent. Cut the nonsense and see through us up. The professor might arrive any minute now, one of them said while still laughing. The dean was currently doing an inspection nearby and was coughed up by the chaos of their class. She entered on their lecture hall. Everyone felt silent. She asked why is there a commotion, and Lucian told her that Felix was pretending as a professor and chuckled. She then cut him off by saying, "But he is your professor." The students looked at him in disbelief. He then nodded at the dean, signaling that he can take over. She nodded back and continued her inspection. After her self-introduction, he asked her a few questions which intimidated the whole class. He started off with Shakespeare's classics Macbeth. Is an accident a catalyst or a destiny? And if so, why is thus an insincere remorse justify leaving a trail of damage? She answered, "I believe it's a catalyst, but a hollow apology never justifies the damage left behind." He walked to the front of the table and said, "Well, I believe that it is unethical to speak against your actions." The whole class found the discussion peculiar, but he went on with the lecture proper, which made them leave behind the topic.
The feud between him and Astria went on for weeks. He would purposely ask her hard questions, and some of them were left unanswered. Upon noticing it, Lucian, her best friend, couldn't help it anymore and confronted their professor.
Why are you always popping up on Astria? Can't you pick on someone else? Perhaps someone who would deal with your nonsense.
He scowled.
Watch your tone, young man. You have no right to question me. And if this class seems meaningless to your bigoted mind, then I suggest you leave my class.
Oh, don't worry, we will.
He replied and held Astria's arm. But to his shock, she pulled away and stood still. I will stay in this class, Lucian. If it bothers you so much, you can take another class. I'll be fine. Disbelief traced upon his face before he turned and walked away. After he left, she confronted Felix. Mr. Malak, I personally am not aware of what your intentions are, but he's right. You've never missed a lecture without criticizing me. Is there something that I did to upset you? She asked, while looking at him directly in the eyes. He looked away and said,
Yes, you did.
And walked past her, leaving her dumbfounded. Once again, he felt a pang of guilt. After the incident, he stopped badgering her, almost completely ignoring her presence. He was not used to being confronted, let alone being berated by his own student. But although he stopped on criticizing her, he catches her staring at him, her gaze locked onto his every movement, which one time caused him to lose focus. And because of that circumstance, he decided to skip his schedule for a few days to rest and contemplate. He was so distracted that he forgot his main objective, to get his wife, Zaria's love back. He sent Zaria a note earlier that morning. It says to meet up with him under the first tree at the Meadow St. George Square after sunset. He prepared an outdoor rendezvous, went to a flower shop, and bought her favorite pink roses, and also hired a violinist for them that night. He dressed himself in her favorite color. He was wearing a white long-sleeved polo with a Ralph Lauren pink Pima cotton v-neck on top of it, beige trousers, and a pair of brown loafers. He was beaming with pride when he saw how dashing he looked in front of a mirror. It was almost sunset when he arrived at their meeting place. He instantly arranged the picnic mat and the basket. He was standing there, holding the bouquet of flowers he bought, and waiting for her, patiently. The last remnants of daylight had faded. The stars lit up one by one, as if commanded by him to twinkle more that night. A minute passed by, then became 30, an hour, 2 hours, 2.5. A touch of hope came to him when he saw a woman nearing him. Heavy droplets of rain fell, one by one, asking him to go home. But he didn't. He waited for the figure to reach his sight. But it wasn't the woman he expected to come. Yet, she sat and waited alongside him, without saying anything. It was already past midnight. He picked the picnic basket and started walking home. Zaria never came. The next day, he was unable to attend his class. He got a fever and cold from last night's rain. Although skiving off, he still has to attend conferences and fulfill his obligations. He went to his department's faculty lounge and started on preparing his lecture materials. Felix had been using the faculty restroom and walked out right as the door slammed. He looked for the sound where the commotion came from. Then he found Astria, wet, crying, and vulnerable. And an unexplainable feeling surged in him, an emotion he hadn't truly felt for decades. He quickly removed his heavy jacket and put it on her trembling shoulders, the rich wool providing immediate warmth. He crouched in front of her, his young old eyes full of genuine concern.
Astria, you're freezing. Are you okay?
He asked. She shook her head. No, she wasn't okay. He looked down at her, his expression a mix of profound gravity and a quiet wonder. He kept his hands anchored on her shoulders, grounding her.
I'll take you to the clinic. Can you walk?
Again, she shook her head.
Please stay.
The only words she could say.
Okay.
He murmured softly, his voice a low soothe.
I'm staying.
He slowly stood up, guiding her toward the small sofa in the corner of the lounge. He sat beside her, ensuring the jacket was tucked securely around her trembling frame. For a long moment, he just watched her. After a few minutes, he finally spoke.
Astria.
Felix began, breaking the silence. His tone wasn't harsh, but it carried the weight of a man demanding clarity.
Why were you acting so weird?
Astria sniffled, pulling the oversized jacket tighter around herself, her eyes fixed on the floor.
I noticed you staring at me during class.
Felix continued, his eyes searching her face.
You looked at me with such intensity. Why?
He asked.
And then I saw you 2 days ago, and I was at the flower shop. I saw you watching me from across the street.
He spoke straightly, as if something would shock him if he didn't.
And last night, at the park, you sat there with me until past midnight.
He leaned in slightly, his brow furrowing.
Why were you doing all of those things, Astria? Why were you there?
Astria's breath hitched. She finally lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed and pooling with fresh tears. The absolute vulnerability in her gaze made Felix's heart shudder.
'Cause I like you.
She confessed, the broken words slowly out of her as if admitting them would tear her apart.
Ever since the day you asked me about Macbeth. And yes, the matcha. I never forgot about it. I never forgot about you.
Felix froze for a split second, words leaving his slightly opened mouth. I also don't know why, but there is just something with the way you talk. Astria continued, her voice trembling, but filled with an undeniable fervor. The way you compose yourself, and the way you handle everything with such absolute certainty. And I wondered, inside your vulnerable zone, is there someone letting you express yourself? With the thought of you being alone and misunderstood, I couldn't stop looking. I couldn't stop caring. For the first time in decades, Felix felt a profound shift ignite within his chest. He felt seen. He felt understood. As he looked into her endearing, tear-filled eyes, the heavy armor of his frozen existence cracked entirely. He knew he had finally given in. The confession feels absolute, vulnerable, and entirely real. Hearing her words, the crushing weight of his isolated life felt lighter, melting away under her gaze. For the first time, someone wasn't looking at him with a cold disgust. Someone wasn't looking at him with a creeping fear of his existence. Astria was looking directly at him, seeing the raw, aching truth of his eternal isolation, and choosing to stay right beside him. Gently, but with an unspoken intensity, he drew a little closer, until only a breath separated them. He could hear the uneven rhythm of her breathing, feel the warmth of it against his face. Neither of them spoke. The silence carried everything their words no longer could. Astria's eyes searched his, uncertain yet unwavering. She made no attempt to pull away. Instead, her fingers slowly tightened around the lapels of his jacket, as though afraid that if she let go, this fragile moment would disappear.
Felix hesitated. Every memory that had haunted him for decades, every rejection, every betrayal, every reminder of the cursed rules within him, urging him to retreat. Yet the woman before him looked at him without the fear, without greed, without a pity. She simply looked at him.
Astria,
He whispered, almost pleading. He shook his head and tried to pull himself away to avoid the awkward moment, but the favor wasn't on his side. Her wet shoes had caused him to slip and fall straight onto her face, his lips crashing onto her. He was shocked when she partly opened her mouth to give his upper lip a space to rest on. He thought she was just shocked. The few moments had passed, and she didn't move. Neither of them pulled away from the kiss. She closed her eyes, as if feeling the tenderness of his lips. Instead of pulling away, she leaned into the kiss, her eyes fluttering shut as she melted against him. Encouraged by her quiet certainty, he finally closed his own eyes and returned the kiss with a tenderness he had never allowed himself to give. One hand gently cupped her cheek, while the other remained around her shoulders, holding her as if she were something impossibly precious. For the first time in decades, the weight of his frozen existence no longer felt so unbearably heavy. For a few fleeting weeks, Felix and Astria lived inside a stolen sanctuary because the heavy gold band on Felix's fingers still bound him to a marriage in ruins. Their love had to exist entirely in the margins of the world, in whispers, shadowed corners, and stolen oars. Yet, within those boundaries, they found a vibrant, breathless youth they both thought had passed them by. They became like teenagers, reckless and consumed. There were quiet afternoon dates in the university library's forgotten stocks. Felix would sit across from Astria for hours, ostensibly with papers spread before him, completely ignoring his own work just to watch her. He loved the way her brows furrowed or how a faint smile jagged her lips as she devoured the vintage poetry and classic novels he had recommended. When she would look up and catch him staring, her cheeks would flush and they would exchange a secret, silent smiles across the mahogany table, hidden from the rest of the world by rows of vasty encyclopedias. On weekends, they fled the city entirely, seeking the isolation of the coast. They took long beach walks under bruised autumn skies, the cold wind whipping through their coats. There, away from the suffocating weight of Felix reality, they would playfully chase each other against the crashing waves. Felix would intentionally slow his pace just to let Astrid catch him, her cold hands sliding into his pockets, their laughter swallowed by the roaring sea. For those few hours, the age lines around Felix's eyes seemed to vanish, smooth over by a genuine joy he hadn't felt in a decade. But their favorite moments were the quietest ones. The dinner dates and the small, warm kitchen of her dormitory apartment. Astrid would spend hours carefully preparing lovely meals for them, humming softly as she worked. Felix would sit on the counter, pouring the wine, content just to be the observer of her domestic grace. They would eat by candlelight, talking late into the night about everything and nothing at all. In those moments, wrapped in the scent of roasted herbs and the warmth of a radiantly happy woman, Felix could almost forget the shadow of Zaria, the looming threat of his frozen curse, and the impending storm of a high society divorce. It went on like this for a couple of weeks, a beautiful, fragile loop of stolen happiness.
Holding her in the quiet dark, Felix would press his lips to her forehead, and they would both whisper wishes into the silence, praying that the world outside would forget about them, that it would stay like this forever. But paradise born from a lie is inherently volatile. Just like a burning cigarette, their love was deeply addictive, but it was always destined to consume itself, burning down to the filter until it finally scorched their fingers.
The bright, fragile loop of their stolen paradise could only spin for so long before the world caught up to them. Lucian noticed the shift immediately. The library table where Felix used to watch Astria read stood empty on their scheduled study night.
The messages grew cold, and the warm fast food dinners in his car completely vanished.
Astria started ditching Lucian entirely, calling off their usual hangouts without a word of explanation. It drove him absolutely insane. As far as Lucian knew, he was the only close friend she had in the world. To be left out of her life so suddenly felt like a betrayal. Unable to handle the suffocating silence, Lucian skipped his classes to tail her through the campus shadows.
That was when he discovered her little secret affair with Felix. Seeing them together, acting like reckless teenagers, ignited a blinding fury in Lucian's chest.
First, he had loved, protected, and taken care of Astria since they were children, shielding her from a harsh world.
Second, he has this certain hatred for Felix.
Felix hadn't just taken Astria years ago. In the grey streets of Edinburgh, he had stolen Lucian's very first childhood love, Zaria. Lucian and Zaria had grown up as next-door neighbors in an impoverished neighborhood, completely inseparable. That was until Zaria's mother, drowning in debt, decided to send her to work as a servant at the wealthy Malek estate. Lucian had begged her mother, Mrs. Courts, not to do it, terrified of the Malik's notorious reputation for replacing their servants exactly 1 year to the day.
Zaria had promised him she would return, but only a few weeks later. The Court's family was suddenly packing their lives into a truck. Their debts miraculously vanished. Lucian had run through the crowded house, frantically searching for Zaria, but found no trace of her. Instead, he found Mrs. Courts admiring herself in a mirror, draped in lavish silk and dripping with gold jewelry. When he demanded to know where Zaria was, she handed him a letter written in Zaria's hand, writing that broke his innocent heart to pieces. She was to be married to a wealthy man, and he was to forget her. Lucian had run from the house until his lungs burned for air. Now, history was repeating itself. The familiar, sickening taste of insecurity and dread poisoned Lucian's mind. He instantly began plotting Felix's total misery. He dug into Felix's life, begging Pierce for information, but hit a wall. Felix was fiercely discreet with his identity, bound by the strict rules of his confidant, Mr. McKinley, but Lucian refused to give up, his obsession fueled by years of buried resentment. The breakthrough came one afternoon in the university cafeteria. With a harsh, ringing clang, Zaria dropped her food tray onto Lucian's table. Shocked and deeply displeased, Lucian stared at the woman from his past, but Zaria did not waste time on pleasantries.
I can help you ruin Felix,
she hissed, leaning in close. She revealed that Felix was demanding a divorce. She wanted revenge, but she needed leverage.
Give me something I can use to destroy the girl,
Zaria demanded. Lucian hesitated, looking at his hands, but the darkness won. To weaponize it against Felix, he traded Asteria's deepest, most tragic psychological secret, mythomania. Flashback. Astria had lived in the isolated woods near their old neighborhood. They had met when Lucian was gathering firewood, and she was looking for her lost dog. He helped her find it and woke her room. But the moment they reached her porch, her father, Armand, was waiting with a horse whip. When asked where she had been, a torrent of elaborate, seamless lies spilled from Astria's mouth. She did not even flinch. She spoke with absolute conviction, as if fabrication were reality. Once her father went inside, a baffled Lucian asked her why she lied. Astria had blinked, genuinely confused, and asked, "What did I say?" truly knowing no awareness of her own actions. Armed with the lethal weapon, Zaria bore it to the Malek, destined to shatter Felix's reality. When Zaria spun the tale of Astria's pathological lying, Felix's mind spiraled into chaos. The memory of their quiet library days and tender beach walks turned sore in his mind. The words choked him, the lethal and cold settled into his chest, completely extinguishing the youth he thought he had reclaimed.
Certainty has left his being entirely. He began to question everything. Astria's tearful confessions, her smiles, their entire relationship. It was a flawless psychological execution, exactly what Zaria had planned. Blinded by agony, Felix drove his green Bentley furiously toward the campus. He marched with heavy, echoing footsteps up the stairs of Astria's dormitory, the illusion of their perfect, teenage-like romance completely shattered. But before he could even demand answers, Astria opened the door, her eyes wide with shock.
"Is it true?" she whispered. "Are you actually married?" Lucian had delivered his blow to her the exact moment Zaria leapt for Felix. Hearing her question felt like a violent slap to his face. Enraged that she was questioning him, Felix sneered.
After everything, you ask whether I am the liar?
For the first time, he looked at her with pure disgust. Astria stared back, horrified. She had not lied to him. She knew she had not, because, unlike her episodes, she remembered every single second spent with Felix. But Felix was beyond listening. He turned on his heel and walked away fast as he could. "Felix, wait!" she screamed. chasing him down the stone hallway barefoot, her pristine world collapsing. He ignored her cries, slammed the door of his Bentley, and sped out of the courtyard, leaving her beyond in a cloud of exhaust. That was the moment Astria completely lost her grip on reality. The fragile stability she had found in their love snapped. She fell to her knees, crying like a lunatic in the middle of the school's parking lot. Watching from the shadows was Lucian. He had orchestrated this, intending to step out and offer his shoulder to cry on once Felix left. But he had vastly underestimated the fragility of her mind. The rejection broke something vital inside Astria. Over the next few days, she drowned in relentless hysterics, and her condition severely worsened. Watching her public deterioration, Armand could not handle the shame of having her as a daughter. In a fit of disgust, he disowned her and threw her into the streets, delirious and lost. Astria wandered without direction. The next time she opened her eyes, she was locked inside the white walls of a mental asylum. Back at the Malik mansion, the vibrant light of Arthur died entirely. The clock seemed to stop, and Felix found himself trapped in a horrific echo of his past self. Locked in his study, drinking his sorrows away until the glass bottles littered the floor. He felt utterly hollowed out, convinced that the tender youth he had experienced with Astria was nothing but a beautiful, fabricated lie. He believed that everyone he had ever loved had simply used him as a toy. A month bled away. The last leaves of autumn were clinging to the bare trees. Zaria, having slithered back into the estate, tried to spark a conversation with the wasted, silent Felix, but received nothing but a cold glare. Sensing the suffocating tension, Ahmed slipped into the room and whispered to Zaria that she had a visitor waiting by the estate's secluded conservatory. It was Lucian, stepping out from behind a row of large, overgrown bushes.
We have to get Astria out of the mental hospital,
Lucian said, his voice trembling with a guilt that had finally caught up to him.
This went too far,
Zaria scoffed, completely indifferent to the outrage they had caused. I could not care less about her, Lucian, she fured, stepping into his space. I still love you. My plan is to take a massive portion of Felix's money through the divorce, and then you and I can move far away from here. Lucian stared at her, tempted by the ghost of his childhood dream, yet hesitant. Think about it, Zaria whispered, then come back to me. They believed they had woven a flawless and invisible web, but they were not alone. Mr. McKinley was on the other side of the glass, quietly harvesting fresh oranges from the conservatory trees. He heard every single word of the malicious plot, and without losing a second, he brought the truth straight to Felix. The revelation snapped Felix out of his drunken stupor like a jolt of electricity. The fog of alcohol cleared, replaced by a terrifying cold fury. He finally saw the real architect of his misery. Confronting Zaria, he spat curses at the only woman he had once thought loved him. Violently throwing her out of the estate, he turned to his loyal confidant, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper.
Make sure she never gets a single scrap of my money, McKinley. Not a dime.
With Zaria cast out in the truth laid bare, the heavy fog of doubt finally lifted from Felix's mind. He realized with he realized with agonizing certainty that Astrea had never lied to him. Driven by a desperate need to undo his mistake, Felix frantically hunted for her, searching through every medical registry and asylum in the country. When he finally located her facility, he walked into her sterile ward and broke down, weeping helplessly. He had once imagined her draped in a white gown at an altar, but never this kind of institutional gown. He rushed to her bedside. He braced himself for her to scream, to curse him, or to shrink away in terror. Instead, the moment Astrea looked into his tear-stained eyes, recognition flowed through her illness. She reached out and pulled him into a desperate, fierce hug. She just held him, breathing him in, as if she had finally found her way home. Felix spent the following weeks fighting tooth and nail to secure her release. He signed every paper, accompanied her through every psychiatric evaluation, and visited her every single day. To ensure their sanctuary would never be poisoned again, he secured ironclad restraining orders, banishing Lucian and Zaria from their lives forever. On the night Astrea was finally released, Felix brought her back to his home. He promised to provide everything she could ever need, but as they prepared to share a bed for the first time, she looked at him softly. "All I need is you by my side, Felix." Before reaching up to turn off the wall lights, Felix looked down at her, the lingering ghost of past pain in his eyes.
Astrea, your condition, was there love part of it? Was it a lie?
Astrea took his hand, her gaze piercingly clear, free of the fog that usually clouded her mind. No, it was not. In fact, our love is how I knew I was sane, because I could never tell you a single lie, Felix, and I remember every single word I ever told you. A profound, healing silence settled over the room. Felix swallowed the heart, asking his final question.
Will you marry me?
Astrea closed her eyes, tucking herself into his chest. If I do, will you finally stop doubting me?
I will,
He whispered against her hair. Then I guess I have to say yes. She smiled, wrapping her arms tightly around him. It was the most peaceful night either of them had experienced in their entire lives. 2 weeks later, they were wed on the first week of winter.
As the vows were exchanged, a heavy, invisible weight suddenly lifted from Felix's chest. The ancient curse upon his body finally broke. In that moment of profound clarity, the witch's old last words echoed in his mind. He finally understood. The 21st had never been only about the age he was doomed to be frozen in forever. It was about the requirement to break the first 21 flowers of love that were never truly meant for him. He looked down at his beautiful bride. It was Astrea, his lily, the 22nd woman, rescuing him on his 22nd winter. The end.